So being back in the Fremantle place, is your place at least set up now how you'd like it?
It is. That was one of the things that I was the most excited about staying in Perth, was I had the opportunity to, I guess, refurnish and start from scratch. Because obviously when I left Bali, I had to sell everything. And I literally moved my entire life back in like 7 suitcases. So I had to start from scratch. So yeah, I worked super hard last year, got a bunch of nice furniture, like sent over from the East Coast. I actually designed some furniture and had it made, which is cool. My couch is a custom couch, which I was very proud of.
Gangster.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I work from home as well. So
You may as well have the place set up to be bougie as fuck.
yeah, for sure. And also, like, if my company can pay for it, then why not?
Yeah, true. Because that all comes off as business expense if it's based on working from home, or
Yeah, still figuring it out, but most of it, yeah.
the accountant's job?
Yeah, it's the accountant's job to make it work for me, basically, to justify like the $5,000 couch or whatever it was.
So run me through, how did you end up doing a custom couch? Is that sort of group that you knew, or where did that sort of come from?
You can just like reach out to suppliers or furniture stores. So if they've got the option to custom make furniture, like if you don't like what they've got on the floor, you can just chat to them and basically say like, hey, this is what I'm after. Yeah, and that was what I did. I just had something like made up for like the size of the space and also just the fabric that I wanted and the color and the material, and yeah, it was awesome. It took like 4 months to make and it arrived and it's great.
What was the name of the group?
I just used Nick Scarley.
Nick Scarley. Oh yeah,
It's
okay.
like a massive furniture store,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they've got this like whole custom section. Like I said, if you go in and you don't like what they've got on the floor, you can just chat to them and they'll pretty much let you do whatever you want.
That's pretty elite. So is it like sort of like this, where it's an L-shaped thing? Is it a single,
Not even
2-3 seater?
It's actually like a 2.5 seater. So it's long enough that I can lie down on it with a little bit of space. But it wasn't like, because the problem that I found with couches is they were either like too big or too small.
Right.
So yeah, I was like, well, this is like the perfect sweet spot. It's like 1/2 2, 1/2 3. Fits me. I can sleep on it. Fits people to sit on it. It's nice. Yeah.
So you went into the store to sort of lay down on someone that you're like, all right, this is the size that I want. Great. And then you're like, all right, here's the measurements. Let's make the custom.
Yeah, it was. I think like my brain is one of the most annoying places to be sometimes, because when I get an idea in my head of what I want and I can't find it, I like refuse to settle for anything less. So yeah, I think as I've gotten older as well, I've realized that if I can just do something myself, I will. If I don't, rather than just settling for something that's there.
I'm sure it feels like a curse, but it's definitely more of a gift.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
But it's somewhat infuriating at times, I bet. It's just like, I want something simple.
Yeah.
Fuck, I can't now.
Yeah, and then it fully like sticks in your brain. You're like, why can I not just be happy with what I have? But then the bonus of that is when I see something I like and I get it done, like I'll love it forever.
Have you always been that way? Do you always sort of remember?
Yeah, I've always been quite, I like to call it tenacious. I've definitely, as I've gotten older and gotten more confident, have just realized that, yeah, I guess as simple as that. Like if you don't like something, don't settle for it. And so
we're all going to die. May as well have the shit we like.
For sure. It sounds so silly because it's just a couch. But yeah, I mean, yeah, fully. It just like falls across into everything else in my life, I guess. Like I just have realized, like I said, if something you like, why should you settle for something that you don't like? And if you can give something a crack and try it, you may as well.
Do you think you would be as dedicated to getting what you want from a furniture point of view if you weren't a design person? Like, do you think one feeds into the other?
I definitely think one feeds into the other for sure. Probably helps as well because when I was living in Bali, I also had a bunch of furniture designed and made. So I had kind of already gone through it and I already knew what I liked. But yeah, I think, again, just being design driven, I like nice things.
Aesthetic things.
Yeah, such a cliche, but very true.
So, I mean, we'll get back to that, but just 4 months, what were you doing? Were you just sitting on crates in the meantime?
No, I was sitting on the floor.
As we are right now.
As we are right now, exactly.
Well, at least you are anyway. I don't think my legs can handle that long. Also,
Yeah.
you can. If you need to push out the table, it will slide that way if you need to. But if you're comfortable,
Oh,
leave it as
handy.
is.
Nice.
So, yeah, from that design side, so you're a web designer, and do correct me if I'm titling incorrectly, but sort of web designer, digital marketing,
Yeah.
sort of, is that a bit more of a cap capture all, I guess, within the design space or web space, or like how do you sort of, I guess, define some of your skills in that domain?
I primarily call myself a web designer because I am, and that's the thing. Out of all the kind of like careers that I've tried or things that I've tried, that's the thing that stuck the most, and that's the one that's had the longevity. So yeah, like first and foremost, UX designer or like web designer. Digital marketing kind of like it goes hand in hand. So I specialize in Shopify, so I build e-commerce sites for clients, but then I also like to look at the larger picture of like, well, what's the messaging behind it? What's the brand? How do you get it out there? So that's where the digital marketing kind of comes hand in hand.
So before you got into web design, was that pre-Bali that you started to delve into design? Like, I guess, what was the process of being like, all right, let's try this, and then, oh, actually, let's try this for a career rather than just a hobby? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory, started out studying nursing and biomed science at uni, didn't like it, swapped to an arts degree and studied PR. And then when I graduated, I got my first job out of uni at a marketing and agency firm out in Joondalup, I think it was. Just
Whoop.
as a, yeah,
Shout out to Joondalup.
far away. Yeah. Yeah, and I was just a project manager, and half of their company was they were building custom websites for clients. And that was what first introduced me to the world of web design. Obviously, I mean, we're talking like 11 years ago. It was a lot different to what it is now. You had to be a full stack developer to be a web designer. But that was what kind of opened my eyes to the design world. Like previous to that, I had not even considered using it as a career path because in my mind I was like, well, if you're creative, you can draw, then you can design. And I can't, like if you give me a pen and paper, I'll draw a scribble. Like I can't produce anything on paper. And so I was always just kind of like project managing web design builds, wishing I was the one doing it. And then, yeah, I just eventually in spare time ended up teaching myself the tools, basically just spending hours and hours on YouTube and just downloading like Adobe and Figma and figuring it out.
So is that little process of just getting going, you saw it, you were like, this is really cool, I'd like to be the one doing it, I think I can make things look better, or, you know, whatever you were thinking at the time.
Yeah.
So the YouTube videos that you're watching, you're talking to a few people, so Adobe. Now looking back, if you're recommending to someone that's, I also look at website and I think I could be creative in that space and I'd really like to start to get involved, is that sort of the same route that you'd recommend, is just jump on YouTube and look at things, or are there any programs that you now go, oh, this is the place to start to get going?
Honestly, just YouTube. Like back then it was very much still if you wanted to change careers or if you wanted to try something, you very much needed a university degree. So it was, I think, and I guess this is where that, you know, that segment that I started with my brain, like if I have an idea or if I don't like something, I'll just find a way to make it happen. I didn't want to go back to uni. And so I kind of just ignored everyone's advice and I was like, I'm going to teach myself and then just try. So yes, I would say if someone's wanting to get into it, you don't necessarily need a uni degree now, but like YouTube's your best friend. And also I think just trying, it sounds silly, but like just open up the software and just click buttons and drag things and just see what happens. It's the best way to learn a program.
Did you already have in mind, okay, so you start playing around with these things, did you already have something in mind that you were thinking about building, or you're purely there just for play purposes?
I was honestly just there for play purposes. I kind of, over the years after seeing the web development, you know, side of things and that as a career, I kind of started to pick up bits and pieces. Probably helped that I was also working. I'm probably going to jump around a little bit. Sorry.
That's cool. That's what I do. You jump around a lot, actually.
Yeah. So when I moved to Bali, I actually got offered a job working as the marketing manager for a web development company. So they were teaching people how to build websites. That was kind of like what really dipped my toes into the design pond of things. And yeah, that helped me to kind of see the process in how you would think about a website and how it comes to life. And so, yeah, I don't know.
So that's interesting. Like, run me through the process. So, you know, it's not just simply putting a website together and with a buy now button and you're done. Maybe it was. I don't know what it looked like 11 years ago when everyone was sort of first getting into it. But I can at least see the evolution of websites over time when we were jumping on, and there was just craziness everywhere. And over time, things got refined and almost became more like, I sort of see it more like Apple products when the Apple iPhone came out, and it was this sort of sleek, sort of like really tight featured phone that everything seemed to flow well, and there were nice grooves and corners and colors. And it sort of was this new age of like really refined, and then the everything web just sort of went from this cluttered thing to this hyper refined, super artistic sort of space.
Yeah.
And so for you, I guess, do you think just a drive of philosophy across that time, or how do you now see the process of setting up sort of a web design for someone?
That's a good question. I feel like when I very first started, I didn't have the knowledge of what it takes for UI design of a website. Like I didn't really understand that your designs will dictate how people interact with your website. When I very first started, I was just like, oh, this box looks pretty, this picture looks pretty, I'll put it there. It's kind of as I've gotten more experience, and you're right, I think especially with COVID, with people coming online over the years, seeing how people now rely more on digital design as opposed to like brick and mortar design, that sort of dictated how websites look and function. Previous to that, I feel like they weren't as important because a website was kind of secondary to your brick and mortar store, right? Like a website was just a thing that you had, kind of like an Instagram account, whereas now it's flipped on its head. So I feel like a lot more thought goes into it because that's where the majority of traffic and business, not for everyone, but for a lot of e-commerce brands especially, the website's that driving force. So there needs to be that level of thought into it because there's so much noise and competition now that you need to be able to think of ways to keep people on your website.
So if you can rewind back to when you were first starting out, let's say you're going to create me, Harry, a physio page where people can book.
Yeah.
How would you have built it then as opposed to now, if you were to give like a brief outline just to see the change, I guess, in whether it be, would you have put a website up for me within like a few days time? Would it have taken months? Would it have been a process involved as opposed to now, I guess, like what is that sort of difference in terms of how it would look like for me as a website physio, a physio website?
A physio website. I think like fundamentally it's still the same. I would have always had an initial conversation with you to find out what you like first and foremost, because that's quite important. And then I would have gone away and tried to understand what's the purpose of you using a website? What are you wanting to get out of it? Who's your audience? How's the brand going to grow? So I think my process is still the same, but now that my skills are a lot more refined, I mean, it would look a lot better. For starters, like gone are the days of just slapping together like a 1-page landing page and calling it a website. But yeah, I think now I would be a lot more interested in your purpose of the brand and what you're wanting out of it. How is it going to grow? Do you want people to come to your website for an educational purpose? Do you want them to come there because they're wanting to purchase or, convert on the website? Are you wanting people to come to you as a source of information? Like, are you plugging in podcasts or YouTube channels or, other like medias that you would be, I guess, wanting to integrate?
So if you're surfing the web now, do you find that you can sort of pick up the level or the extent to which someone has really invested time in understanding purpose and function on their website as opposed to people that haven't? Are there any sort of key flags that you sort of go, I know someone's either not spent time here at all or, have missed the mark completely versus like, wow, they've absolutely nailed this? Like any sort of key features that tend to stick out to you?
Yeah, I'll speak more so in the e-commerce space because that's where my experience like primarily lies. But like first and foremost, it'll always be for me how it looks. Like you can tell, or I can tell sort of straight off the bat if it's a DIY home job versus they've had a designer sit down and think of it. Usually it would be like, what, how prominent is the branding? How nice does it look? Does it, is there like a flow to the page? And then I guess I would always go back and look at functionality. So like, I guess like the heading, for example, or like your header, is there too much padding in it, or does it work? Or, what does the navigation look like? What's the order of the navigation? And that would be kind of where I would break it down.
Where do you see the website now for the bulk of businesses that you deal with, as you say, Shopify, so which is an online storefront, right? Where it's easy to set up to be able to sell and ship products is, sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's I think what Shopify is basically for. So for people that you work with, I guess, that are looking to sell products, is website now ultimately like the number one place if you don't have that set up? are you completely dead in the water?
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're completely dead in the water, but like investing in a website is so important because it's effectively replacing your brick and mortar. And once you've got a good website and it's live and it looks good and it functions, then there's so many ways that you can send traffic to it. Like it really is the world's your oyster. And so I think that's been the biggest shift that we've seen since COVID is that people have had to go online, but also because a website's not a physical thing, right? So I feel like sometimes there's a bit of a barrier with businesses investing the money that it takes to set up a proper website because they can't physically walk into it and sit down at a desk and sell products. So I think, actually, I'm not really answering your question. Sorry. I went off on a tangent.
You're allowed to go off on tangents. That's kind of what it's all about, really.
Yeah.
So are there businesses that you currently see at the moment that would really benefit that are just, again, not really hitting the mark? Are you sort of seeing any particular groups that are really not investing the time in that? Or is it you just happen to come across every now and then, like, missed it?
Yeah, it's just coming across it. Like, I think the biggest or like the most important change that I've seen in e-commerce stores, particularly in the last year, is like how they've optimized the checkout. So for example, like if you're on a product page and you're looking at a white shirt and it's got a recommended products like slider underneath and it says, hey, you may also like this, or you've got the option to build a bundle and then, you know, you add it to your cart and then you check your cart and then it comes up with another pop-up saying like, hey, you've got this in your cart, spend an extra $35 and you can get free shipping. Here's what you could buy. That's super important. I would say that that's something that I do see a lot of businesses missing out on in the e-commerce space is how many touch points have you got with someone before you convince them to purchase, and how easy do you make it for them to purchase when they get there? So yeah, that's something that I always look for now, especially when I'm like shopping on websites that offer more than just like a few items. You know, if it's like a clothing website, how do they try and upsell you along the way?
And how are you then, are you tracking this information for your clients? Someone comes to you and I believe the current, you started off with Your Collective.
Yeah.
Are you still Your Collective or have you moved to Studio Otra?
No, so I'm still Your Collective and I work with Studio Otra. So That's another long story.
Okay, I was going to say, yeah, we'll circle back to that one as well. So I come to Your Collective and I go like, yep, I'd really like a website to sell my physio t-shirts, sunglasses and hats. Yeah. And you go, yep, no worries, put it together. And then are you sticking around with me for, days after, weeks after, months after? I guess, what does that relationship look like so that I understand like, oh yeah, wow, I've got all these sales now. Fantastic. How did this come about?
Honestly, it depends on the client and how involved they want you to be. I'll always stick around for at least the first month after just to do like, post-launch like help, or if anything goes wrong, or to answer questions. A big part of my process when I build a website for a client is I also do training when I hand it over. So I show them how to use the site so that they've got full control over it. So naturally, when you're handing it over and you're teaching someone how to use the website, there's a lot of questions that pop up. But yes, I would generally like still check in and I would check the analytics and I would just make sure that everything's working as it should, or, if we've got X amount of people landing on the website, what percentage of those people are converting. So I always keep an eye on that. It also helps me to understand as well the projects that I'm building, so that if you ever do put a website out and there's not been a great conversion rate, I would always go back to the website and see if there's a problem on the website itself versus is it maybe the content that someone's put on the website, or is it their marketing efforts or lack thereof.
So with, a client comes to you with a brief.
Yeah.
This is sort of what I want. And I'm sure you get a wide varied amount of briefs. Some with just like, I just want a website versus, I don't know, like a 10-page essay on what someone's after.
Yeah.
What should a client be asking themselves in order to really optimize or make their brief as, succinct or as good as possible to help you in this process?
The thing that I always get clients to do and I find has been the most helpful is goals, but also other websites that they like and why they like them, because that really helps me, especially when clients often don't know. Like they'll come to me, they're like, hey, I want a website. I have no idea what I need. I have no idea what I want. Can you figure it out? And I'm quite often the person that has to piece it together. So the easiest way for me to understand what a client wants from their website is to get them to show me websites that they like and then to break it down and tell me what it is about the website that they like. That's where I can then kind of like piece it together for a client and make it as easy as possible and also sort of understand what they're needing from the project.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it would be hard if you're not someone in the space.
Yeah.
You don't look at websites all day long. You know
Yeah.
you want one, you know you want the result, but
Yeah.
why you like certain things, and that I think that makes sense as to how you'd go about doing that. So you before all this is going on, before I guess your collective, right? Give me a bit of a timeline now. So you end up having this long stay in Bali, 5+ years,
Yeah.
I believe, at which time you're obviously doing freelancing, you're doing occasional marketing managing, it sounds like, as well, and a few other things. So where along the line is your collective coming out, and are you sort of from the get-go doing this web design as a freelancer, or is this coming later in the piece? How does this actually work for you? And you know what? I'll pause before I ask something else after that.
Yeah. So so out of uni, I moved to Perth for uni, and then I stuck around for about 2 years after I'd graduated. That's when I was working as the project manager for the web design and marketing agency. Loved working in website space, but like I said, I wasn't the one who was actually doing the work, which it didn't sit super well with me. I jumped around from agency to agency, had the same problem everywhere I went. I then moved to Melbourne and was working for a really cool fashion PR agency. And again, I was kind of thrown into this really beautiful kind of like aesthetic curated design sort of space, but I wasn't actually the one that was doing any of the work. I was just kind of the backbones, the structure of it all. Still super wasn't happy trying to figure out like career wise what I wanted to do. I then moved to Sydney and transferred with the fashion PR agency that I was working with. I'd been in Sydney for 3 months, and this company in Bali reached out to me. They'd heard of me through like a friend of a friend.
Hey-o.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so basically they have these like website boot camps. It's kind of like a yoga retreat, but people will fly to Bali for 12 days. They'll teach them the fundamentals of coding and design. They needed someone to help sell tickets basically to the boot camp. They asked me to come over on a 3-month contract. So I just moved to Sydney from Melbourne, had just settled down, and got this. It wasn't even a job offer, it was a contract. Got this contract offer, said yes, and then a month later I was there. That was what really, really threw me into the web design side of things. I ended up working with them. We extended like contract. I ended up staying with them for a year, but pay wasn't great. So this is how and why I moved to Bali, was to go and work for this company. Got to Bali and just realized like, this place is amazing. I'm actually going to stay. But yeah, so I was working for this company. Pay wasn't great. I needed to make more money. So I was like, you know what? I'll just freelance. I'll just see what happens. I'll just start telling people I'm a designer, even though I'm not, and I'll see what happens. But I needed clients and money to do that, right? Like I needed to find people to hire me. So I spent probably like 3 days just cold pitching, messaging people on Instagram who didn't have websites, or like maybe their websites weren't very good.
This is just people local to Bali?
Local to Bali, online in Australia. The good thing about Bali was that there were a lot of expats living there. So there were a lot of, like Australians over there. So I kind of found those businesses just through so much like research and Instagram stalking. And I just sent a bunch of people a bunch of messages saying like, hey, I'm a web designer. I do marketing. Looks like you need help. Like, what do you need? That eventually kicked off. I ended up with 7 clients doing it that way, which all came very quickly. Super grateful. And then I would...
How are you pricing yourself at this point?
Look, not well.
I'll do it for a nasi goreng and a bintang.
Honestly, it started out like that, but that's the most humbling thing about freelancing, is that you need to, especially if you have zero clue what you were doing, which that was me. I had no idea. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, had no experience, had nothing to show for it other than just like me sitting down with someone and convincing them to hire me. I was charging, probably my first few websites, I would say would have been about $300. But
elite.
Yeah, you know what? It was enough that like
300 more than you had otherwise.
Exactly. And I was like, this is the only way to learn.
Yep.
And fortunately, I threw myself super hard into it, did a good enough job that those clients then would like referred me on to their friend. And then over probably the space of like 4 or 5 months, it just like snowballed. And yeah, that was how I eventually like grew or created Your Collective. Was I was freelancing. Within the space of that 4 months, I was making more money freelancing than I was with that job that I'd moved to Bali for. So I quit with them and decided to become like a freelancer, a sole trader full time. That was how I came up with Your Collective. And then I just threw myself headfirst into that. I figured that, again, like if people are building websites or if they're wanting to go online, they also then need to drive the traffic there. So then I just threw myself into understanding Facebook advertising and advertising as well as just marketing. And I just...
So within that 4 months, so you're building up until eventually you're outbidding your current paycheck.
Yeah.
Did you have to do any more outreach or like really on the ground marketing after that initial 3-4 days of just cold, get a few clients? Did you just sort of manage word of mouth from then on afterwards?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I was just word of mouth from then. But I threw myself into learning everything I could. Like I juggled freelancing and a full-time job for those 4 months. I had no social life. I listened to podcasts. I watched YouTube videos. I followed other designers on Instagram. I stalked everything that they were doing and basically just tried to learn as much as I could. And it paid off because then I was just getting super obsessed with these jobs that I took them really seriously. And my goal was to do as good a job as I could so that I would get the referral. And that was worked. And then I just eventually grew that into like full ass business.
So cool. So did you have an idea in mind when you started this, what success would look like to you?
I had no idea. All I knew was that I really liked web design and I thought that was something that I wanted to work in. But like how I got there and what that would look like, I literally had zero clue. My biggest goal was just like make enough money to live. And so I don't have to ever work for anyone else again.
So you held on to the job that you had over there sort of just to keep making sure you had a little bit of a safety net.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have jumped in so readily without that safety net? Because I was going to say.
Not at all. And I've had quite a few people reach out over the years asking me like, how do you start a business? And I always say to people, it's a grind and it's a hustle, but you have to, unless you've got money behind you, you need that safety net because like things go wrong. Maybe it's slow. Maybe you're not as good as you think you are and you don't get referrals or you have quiet patches. I was quite lucky in that I had already built up quite not a following, but I got quite known quite quickly in Bali as being a designer because there weren't many people there that could make things look nice but could also build it as well. And so I got really lucky in that I was one of the first, I guess, like Westerners to move to Bali who was working in the Shopify space. I also started Your Collective about a year before COVID. And so everyone, as you know, like everyone went online and that just like my business exploded then. I was really, really lucky. I got quiet for probably like a month and had a panic when everyone just like shelled up. But then I had so many people reaching out and I had so much work coming in that I eventually had to hire 3 people to work with me just to sort of like keep up with the workload.
Great problem to have.
Really good problem to have. And like I'm very much the type of person that like if you give me a problem or a goal, like I'll find a way to make it work. Like I kind of like sink or swim. Like I really am proud of myself, but like I swum so hard and I made it happen.
So you're a big swimmer. So you get in all this work. What is it like going from, okay, you're a solo entrepreneur, freelancer now, make it on your own already? That's an amazing like feat where you probably feel pretty amazing because as you say, you're really just working your own 2 feet. Doesn't matter where you go in the world now, you know that you can bring in an income and you don't have to work for someone else. So already huge major tick.
Yeah.
Second problem, you know how to work with yourself. How do you then start working with others? That
was not a steep learning curve. I got very fortunate and this is where Studio Otra comes into play. So the first thing that I needed to do was I realized that I was spending so much time being client facing and designing that I didn't have enough time to then also develop websites when I got all of these projects in. So I hired a developer to come and work with me. This really cool girl called Tash. I met her while I was living in Bali. She came on and helped me with a bunch of projects. And fortunately, we are literally cut from the same cloth. Our birthdays are like a week apart. We're both Capricorns. We're both super tenacious. We're super driven. It's funny, like my friends used to joke that there's 2 versions of me. There's like Gemma, and then there's like work Gemma. And work Gemma is very like direct and blunt and just gets shit done and can be a bit difficult to work with because I can be, I guess, like I have high expectations, but Tash was exactly the same as me. And so again, like, I don't know if it's fortune or if it's just like stars aligning. We just worked so well together. Like, we've never had a problem. The two of us grew so much, like especially tapping into Shopify and taking on really, really big projects. That in itself was a learning curve when we then started to take on like big international fashion brands that have, you know, like they need a specific, like a separate website for the US market and a separate website for the Australian market. And they've got like multiple drop shipping and stores. And that was a hard learning curve because that was when we hired 2 more people to work for us. And that was difficult because I hired like a full stack developer, and I just had to have like blind faith in him that the work that I was passing him, he knew what to do, because I had no clue. So that was hard. That was hard learning how to work with people that have skill sets that you don't have, because I can't manage their work and make sure that it's going well. And that was like a bit of a control freak thing for me. It was difficult to give that control up, but yeah, it was good. A lot of communication. It taught me a lot of patience as well, and like sitting down and understanding that if someone does something differently to me, that is okay, as long as I can understand why, and then figuring out how we can make it work moving forward.
So yeah, any things you would do differently, given the fact that, you know, when you bring on new people, one, it's a challenge just working with people. 2, you're sort of managing these people as well because you're the bossman.
Yeah.
And then 3, it's work that you, as you say, you don't quite understand. So any checks and balances, or, you know, things that you do differently, going through that same process again?
Honestly, I don't think so. Like, I knew Tash personally, so I knew that her work was good, and I knew that we already got along quite well. When I hired Pedro and Olga, they came referred to me through someone else. So I tried to vet them as much as I could, and I knew that they had worked with someone. So other than like this friend who referred them, not only did he know them, he had also worked with them, and he could also vouch for their work. So I wouldn't do anything differently. And I guess the only thing would be like just checking someone's work. Like, no matter, I think, like, you're always going to have a problem working with someone. Not you're always going to have a problem, but like, it's always going to be a learning curve when you work with other people, because it's different personalities. And I don't think you can really prepare yourself for that, other than just accepting that you'll have to put more effort into communication, which, yeah, that was a nice lesson for me.
Is that what you found? Because when problems inevitably do pop up.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Yeah. So when problems do inevitably pop up, again, I guess, is there any difference from how you would originally deal or handle with a problem in the early stages versus how you tend to deal with things like that now?
Yeah. A big one for me was I want to be liked by everyone. And so I would kind of, if like I did have some problems with this stuck developer, just he would disappear for a little while, or, you know, he wouldn't fix problems on time, and then I would have to go back to the client and explain why the issue didn't get fixed. Or so yeah, I guess I would approach it differently, in that I would just make sure that I had put time aside for project managing my own business. That was something that I just sort of assumed, like, oh, if I hired people, like, I'll just give them a task, they'll do it, it'll all be great. Like, it's not always the case. You do actually have to, even if you don't understand the work that they're doing, you do have to make an effort to sit down every day and find out what they've done and where they're up to, and have they had any blockers, have they had any problems. That's one thing that I would probably do differently, was just, yeah, understanding that I have to project manage my own business.
Particularly probably in the early stages, right? When you're first getting to understand how people deliver on things, and, you know, inevitably you want to take away the guardrails for someone that is, you know, performing super well. Yeah. But yeah, I can imagine in the early stages, whilst everyone getting a feel, just being able to get a sense of like, do people deliver on time, and keeping people accountable in those early stages would be something you wouldn't think about, right? Because you, as you said, you and your partner are completely dedicated that you're going to get stuff done. You're like, get into work mode, things are going to get finished. And when it's not your business, maybe people don't have quite the same drive on timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. And there's absolutely no way to know how a person operates, other than giving them like a task to trial before they come on and work for you. So yeah, just being more prepared for that. And I guess also just understanding that like things will go wrong and it's okay, and not freaking out, and giving yourself a buffer as well. Like, you know, if the person working for you says it's going to be done on Tuesday, don't tell the client, hey, I'll show you Tuesday night. Like, you know, if internally a task is due to finish on Tuesday, tell the client you'll give it to them on Thursday, so that you then have time to go back, check the work, And then that way you can, you can over deliver and deliver early in best case scenario.
Yeah, so setting those expectations, giving yourself buffers, sounds like pretty important stuff. So how do you, as you say, the web space is very crowded. You were sort of maybe a little bit right place, right time.
Yep.
That's all well and good, but how do you separate your collective versus other designers? Do you feel like you have a separation somehow, or a standout, or a tagline, I guess, that for you guys makes you feel different?
Good question. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Tash and I have always worked really hard on doing is working with small businesses. And a big draw card for us was that when you work with bigger corporations, you quite often have no idea what they're doing. Or like if you work with bigger agencies, like they'll build you a website. I guess the fear has always been that they'll hand you back a website and you have no idea how to use it or what to do. And then if you want to make a change, they'll charge you this obscenely high rate to make a change. And then you feel like you have no control over your site. Tash and I have always from the get-go, I guess because we're business owners as well, we understood the importance of having control over the things that are, that you have within your business. So we do, when we hand over websites, we do, rather than just sitting down with someone and showing them how to use the website, we actually film custom tutorials and then we send it to them in a library so that they can refer back to it. So we found that was always a big draw card for us, because we would build a website that people love, but then we would also show them how to use it. And then it was custom as well. It wasn't just like a generic, here's a YouTube video and how to change a homepage. It was specific to their website and their content and the pages that we knew that they were wanting to edit the most. And I think that gave people the confidence in working with us, because they knew that not only did they get a website that they loved, they also then got a website that they could use moving forward.
Yeah, it would have to be a bit of a differentiator, particularly with, if I think about, Dad as a small business owner who knows nothing about web, whatever, it would be a near impossible feat for him to do anything without like a very step-by-step training protocol. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would very much appreciate like a walkthrough, like, oh, thank God, like I don't have to figure this out myself.
Yeah.
So then your collective, it's booming, it's taking off. You're now working with fashion brands, and you've also had some experience with PR and fashion brands and stuff.
Yeah.
And then little old Jackson Lee Studios sort of emerges. So this is your own fashion or clothing brand that you sort of come up with. So you're pumping out, this business is really growing. You've got lots of work on. Why do you then take on the challenge of a clothing brand yourself?
I am like such a yes person. And again, if you give me like a problem, a task, a challenge, and if I'm into it, I'll give it 110%. So this was a bit of a COVID project that started with one of my best friends, Jonathan. So we were living in Bali. To be honest, I just had a bunch of money saved and I didn't know what to do with it. And his name's Jonathan. We call him Jay. Jay just came to me one day and he was like, why don't we start a clothing label? Like, we dress the same. We like the same things. We've both got like money saved up. We've both got spare time. Let's just give it a go. And I was like, yeah, like I'd literally never thought of it one day. He just came to my house and he was like, Gemma, I've got this crazy idea. And I was like, you know what? Yes, let's do it. And that was how we started Jackson Lee Studios. It was literally just a conversation. And yeah, I was like, you know what? I will learn something new.
What got you excited about that? So obviously your friends come to you, you've been around fashion, I guess, in general. You're in Bali, you've got a bit of a war chest that you kind of want to go like, what can we do with this? What sort of learning experience next? What was sort of for you at least, the main like, yes, I do want to give it a go. Like why was that something that was really appealing to you?
I have come to realize that I love anything to do with design and building. Doesn't matter the medium. And I guess this is where like when we were talking about at the start, designing the couch, like I just love the idea of creating something. And this was a new medium. Like you said, I've been working with e-commerce clients and I just loved being in like the fashion space. And so when Jay came to me and he was like, let's just see what we can do, I just loved the challenge of it. Like I just loved the thought of, how can I have an idea in my brain that I now, rather than putting on a digital space, I now put into a physical space, and then you see someone walking around wearing your clothes. Like I just loved the idea of that.
Okay, and so then how did the first designs come out? Like you're going, all right, we're going to do clothing brand, Jackson Lee Studios.
Yep.
So, you're starting to already go like, great. Now, what what are you deciding in terms of the philosophy of the clothing? Like, how is this all sort of developing? Like, I want to start a fashion brand today. Let's just say I want to start some clothing. Where did you start? What was like step one for you guys?
Step one was, well, I guess neither of us have a design background in terms of fashion. Like he's an international supermodel, and I obviously work in the e-commerce space. That was it. So the first thing we did was just ask around, and we found a tailor who could help us with the biggest battle that we had, which was creating patterns. We're like, we can probably sketch out an idea, we can choose fabrics that we like, but when it comes to turning that into an actual pattern that you can make, we had zero clue. So we just spent a few weeks, reaching out to other friends who had clothing labels saying like, hey, do you have a tailor that we can use? Do you have someone we can talk to? And eventually someone was super nice and they gave us their contact, and we met this tailor called Max, who's a really lovely Indonesian man. And again, right place, right time. We just worked super well with him because it was COVID. He'd gotten quite a bit slower in terms of work, so he had a lot of time to help us. Jay and I basically just like printed off a bunch of pictures of other clothes that we liked from other websites, went to the fabric store, found fabrics that we liked, and just gave it all to Max and said, hey, like, help us turn this into a thing. And so we worked really closely with Max over probably like 2 or 3 months to then turn our ideas into like a physical piece of clothing, because that was the thing that Jay and I couldn't do. But that was like, even with starting Jackson Lee and also your collective, like I just asked. If I didn't know something, I just asked people like, hey, I can see that you do this thing that I want to do. How did you get there? And then from there, you eventually start to formulate a plan and you navigate a path and you figure out how to do things.
So how are you separating time between your collective, now start trying to build up this new business? What was sort of your split there?
I didn't have a split. Again, Capricorn, if you give me something, I will literally not stop until it's done. So I didn't sleep, I just put everything on hold. But I loved it. Like, that's the beauty of even like your collective, Jackson Lee. When I really love something, I don't mind if I work around the clock on it. I'll work weekends because it's fun. And it was fun, Jay and I would get on the back of the bike and we'd drive around Denpasar and we'd go to all these fabric studios and we'd go to dye houses. And it, like, that for us didn't feel like work. That felt fun. Yeah, so I've always been very structured with your collective. I've always stuck to sort of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, because it needs structure to work. And then it was just Jackson Lee was every spare minute in and around that, mostly on weekends. But I mean, when you're running a business with your best friend, like I said, it doesn't feel like work. So it was very easy to find the time to do it because, yeah, it was interesting. It was fun. It was exciting.
So after 3 months, you've gone through this process. So it's not like you've within a week gone, great, we've got the fabrics and we've got the patterns and we got this, and it's like you're going. So it's taking a bit of time to develop like the style that you want. Your tailor's getting used to sort of making the clothes. So after this sort of 3 or 4 month period, have you just made the final set of this is what we want it to look like, or do you already now have a bit of a stockpile of things that you could sell if you wanted?
Yeah, so we had a full collection. We had, I think, about 35 pieces in total. So we did men's and women's clothes. Again, I don't know if it's right place or right time, but being in Bali, we were able to move really quickly. Like, once we decided on the patterns that we had and the sizing, we just gave it to Max and said, hey, go and make us like, I don't know, 20 of each in each sizes. So that took about another 2 months to then have all the clothing made. From like start to launching and being in shops was 6 months.
Okay. And over that 6 month period, roughly how much does something like that cost at that time?
So I put up the initial investment and it was cost 16,000 Australian dollars.
Okay.
Yeah. 6
months to have enough product that if you were to sell all that product the next day, what would the return on that have been?
It took us, so our profit margins, we were quite fortunate, we're sitting at about 65%.
Damn.
Yeah. Again, Bali, like we were able to make the money back very quickly.
Elite.
Which was good. I can't really answer that question because doing it in Bali versus doing it here is super different. Obviously, like costs are a lot lower, but we had made the initial investment back probably within like the first year. But keeping in mind, we were also having to put money back into the business. So
yeah, sure.
Even though we made the money back really, really quickly, we didn't pay ourselves until, after that first year. So like everything we made went straight back into production, fabric, upfront costs, because you have to have everything made in bulk upfront. But yeah, we made it back pretty quickly.
How did you know? So, you're going through this process, you're making this clothing. How are you getting a sense that this clothing is going to move? Did you have any idea if people were going to buy it, or was it literally just, all right, it's live,
Yeah.
see what happens?
We had no idea. Like, Jackson Lee was not our full-time job. That this was just something that we just did on weekends, and we always said if it sells, that's great. If it doesn't, so what? It was fun. So I guess we had a bit of an idea because we both worked in fashion, so we kind of knew styles, somewhat would sell. We got really lucky again. One of our friends opened a store in Uluwatu and they stocked us and we sold out on their opening night.
Wow.
Yeah, we had nearly 100 pieces with them and it all sold, which was amazing. That's when we realized like, oh shit, like maybe we're onto something here. So yeah, other than that though, it was just like blind faith. But we also, I guess it was a little bit of ignorance in that we just didn't care. Like we were like, if no one buys our stuff, like we literally don't care.
Sure, right.
We found it fun, we liked it, and that was always our goal.
They certainly say that in cold calls as well. If you're not there, if you're not desperate to sell, then you're much better at selling.
Oh, for sure. And it took the pressure off it needing to be profitable.
Yeah.
Like making 16 grand back in the first year. Like if you're going to pay yourself a salary, you can't. There's no way. But like for us, we didn't mind if it moved fast, slow. We didn't mind that we had to put everything back into the business because it was never for financial gain. It was always just, let's see how it goes.
So where is it at now? Is Jackson Lee Studios still continuing? I guess where is it at?
It's been a little bit difficult since I left Bali, just managing production, both still working full time. So we made the decision this year to sell all of our stock. So yeah, we are no longer doing Jackson Lee Studios. We still get sort of dribs and drabs from the shops that sell, but it's just like the last stock. So we ran it for probably like 2.5 years.
Sad to see it go? Or?
Yeah, I was sad to see it go, but it was just always on that point where, like I said, we were just constantly putting money back into the business and it needed us to both either quit our full-time jobs and work full-time on the actual business itself to then grow it to a level where we could take a salary from it. And neither of us wanted to do that because it was always just a passion project. So yeah, I was very sad to see it go because that was a nice creative thing that we could do without having like client expectations or, a client dictating what you would do. So that was like the creative outlet for us, I guess. But it was cool. Like the craziest thing I ever had was when I had just moved back from Bali. I had moved to Perth. I went back a few months later just to do some work. And then when I was on the plane home, I was on like a Jetstar flight. The guy next to me was sitting in a pair of Jackson Lee shorts that he'd obviously bought from one of the shops. And I just I didn't say anything to him, but I took a sneaky little photo and I just had such a fangirl moment. I was like, this is wild. Like this is a stranger I've never met before wearing clothes that we designed. That was really cool.
That's very cool. Have you seen them much around at all in Perth?
Not in Perth. We see it a lot in Bali still.
Yeah.
But yeah, not in Perth.
Very cool. Do you have a few of your favourite pieces that you've sort of held on to yourself?
Yeah, I do. I really like our oversized shirts. Yeah.
Now collector's items.
Yeah, exactly. Now worth a fortune.
So Jackson Lee Studios, that's sort of wrapped up. Is that because, again, you guys couldn't work on it full time? Are you looking at other things that you're wanting to sort of do, or it was more just refocus on the current business that you're doing with your collective and now this sort of mix that you're doing with the Studio Ultra? Was it just a natural progression? You and Jay had that sort of conversation. It was like, look, we're both doing different things.
Yeah.
Had a great time, move on. Was that conversation again that you had at that time? Because it is difficult to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a really difficult thing, particularly if you've seen success, which you have in this case as well. There's always a bit of a temptation, like what could happen? So how did you know, I guess, that it was time to, all right, let's take a pause on this one?
We always said that the minute that we have to start putting more of our own money into it, beyond, like we never put any more than the initial investment into it. And so we said if it either gets to the stage where we're having to put more money in or it becomes stressful and not fun anymore, that would be when we call it. And it got to the point where it was, not that it was stressful, but it was, like I said, it was just always teetering on the edge of needing us to quit our full-time jobs to jump head first into it. It eventually got to that stage where we were then having to just pour so much back into the business and it got it got stressful because we were like having to keep up with orders from shops, but I wasn't.
Plus, you're not there anymore.
Plus, I wasn't there anymore. And then we also had the problem of the main fabric that we used in Bali became out of stock and they weren't making it anymore. And so we weren't able to fill the orders that the shops were giving us. But then I wasn't there to then go and find new fabrics and come up with new designs. So when it hit that point, we both were like, you know what? We're happy to leave it here. And thankfully, we'd had enough stock made that was able to see us out for the next few months. And then that was when we finally got to pay ourselves back, which was nice.
Yeah, you're like, oh.
Yeah, we finally saw some good money from it.
So did you ever consider just selling off the brand itself?
No, to be honest, I wouldn't even know how to. And it also just never came in question. I think we were just so proud of what we did. We didn't want to see anyone else working on it because it was just like a little project that we started. Like we just wanted to leave it at that. You know, we were happy for it to kind of like die and well, not die, but we were happy to put it to bed.
Cycle, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been through the phase for yourself. So
yeah,
this is now, you've spent this 5 years in Bali. You've been building up your collective, this sort of digital freelance. You've got a team behind you. You've been building out a clothing and fashion brand as well. And then you're starting to get towards this end of this 5-year period. So what's sort of happening as you're figuring out what you're doing as you're getting towards the end of this Bali trip? Why is there sort of a sudden shift back overseas?
So I was in Bali. I had a partner for the most of the time that I lived in Bali. We split up, and then I realized when we split up, I didn't want to be in Bali anymore, and it was very small. And I met a guy on Hinge after I'd split up with this partner who was from Canada. And then like we had a few weeks together. It was great. And then he was like, hey, come to Canada with me. And I went to Canada with him and it was awesome. And that was once I'd left Bali and lived in another city, that was what made me realize like I don't want to live in Bali anymore. I felt like I'd hit a bit of a like stagnant place in work as well. Like I wasn't really working on anything new. I wasn't really growing. I wasn't challenging myself so much anymore. Like Jackson Lee was just ticking over at that point. We weren't designing anything new. My business was kind of running really well. I wasn't leveling up in any regard. So then, yeah, when the option to move to Canada came up, that was exciting. And that was like a new challenge to throw myself into. So that was kind of what inspired me to leave Bali. And yeah.
With Bali as well. So, that's, everyone sees it as paradise.
Yeah.
Island paradise at the time. What are some of the things that, maybe people aren't prepared for, particularly living there a long time? Because I'm guessing you saw a lot of people come in, a lot of people leave. What sort of separated some of the people that really made it work and those who didn't?
The people that owned their own businesses and were able to make money, which this sounds really silly. It is very hard to make money in Bali because you can't just go and get a little job on the side. So you have to have like a fully functioning business to be able to sustain a lifestyle there. It's actually pretty expensive as well. So you can pay for villas like monthly, of course, you can rent them monthly, but if you're living there long term and you want your own house, you have to pay for everything up front. So, you've got to pay the entire year's worth of rent up front. Or if you've got a property that you've built, you've got to pay for it like 5 or 10 years up front. And same with the motorbikes. Like I had my own bike, but I had to pay for it up front. So I had like the thing that people don't, I guess, always understand about Bali is that like if you're living there for 6 months or so, it's quite cheap because, you can do it on a low budget. But if you want to live there and have a house and a bike and a business, it's like also the residency visas are really expensive. You have to set up a company in order to then sponsor a residency visa so you can stay there not on a tourist visa. So it's expensive. That's the biggest thing I would say to people moving there and living there long term is that like financially you actually need to be as set up as you would be here.
So how much would I, if I want to go over and do it now, in your estimation, how much money would I want to have in the bank that can, prepare myself for that?
If you were looking to like stay there for 5 years, for example, I would say easily like 30 grand, which sounds silly. And again, you can do it cheap. Like you can live in a guest house and be fine, or you can share a villa and be fine. But like if you want a house that's empty and you want to furnish it and you want to get a new bike and you want to live there full time, like it's all still quite expensive. Setting up the company itself cost me about $5,500. So you have to set up a company. Once you've got your company set up, you're the director of a company. You then have to assign yourself a kitas, which is your like residency visa. That costs, I think it's like $2,500 or $3,000 just for the visa, on top of like setting up the company costs.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty
Spenno.
It's pretty expensive.
And you're doing all that before you've confirmed the fact that your business is going to do well.
Yeah.
So like you're purchasing all that up front, and then you're going out and doing the freelancing. Or was it sort of a little bit later in the piece that you sort of...
It was a little bit later in the piece.
Okay.
I'd been there for about a year, and then when COVID struck, that was when I realized, all right, if I'm going to stay here long term, rather than just like, you know, living in like fully furnished villas that I don't really like, and just, you know, flying in and out every 3 months on a tourist visa, that was when I realized I had to like knuckle down and do it properly. So yeah, that was
sort of the dealio. And then what were the sort of the things that you were doing in order to keep yourself like accountable, healthy mind, just generally moving forward with progress? Because again, you're working by yourself, you're seeing success, which is really motivating, right? Like if you're working hard and then you see something that you're achieving, like it's kind of easy, not necessarily easy, but it's certainly a lot easier to continue going and keep that sort of momentum forward. But I also know that you're physically quite active as well, running, fighting, a few other things. So what were some of the things that you were doing, I guess, during that period, just to keep yourself mentally and physically in the right headspace or in the right space?
always sports. So I am an amateur Muay Thai fighter, so I was always training really hard in Bali. And I also got into running a lot as well. So it was like a non-negotiable that every day I had to carve out at least an hour to exercise in some form. So whether it was running, whether it was Muay Thai, I also surf, so I would surf quite a lot. That was my non-negotiable. It's also like really high intensity exercise, and surfing as well is the same. Although it's not necessarily high intensity, you have to be very focused. Especially like, you know, I was shortboarding as well, so like you go out and there's massive sets. You don't want to be like sitting out there dilly-dallying around. Like these 3 different activities helped to kind of like keep me sane and I guess healthy with work, and the rest of my life was it was like an outlet, and it forced you to kind of like remove yourself from everything that was going on in your brain and just kind of like focus on that moment that you're in. That was always like the thing that I used to I guess like keep me like healthy and motivated.
So I know, as you say before, that you're an amateur Muay Thai fighter. You've actually had a few fights yourself. Now, how many total have you had?
I've had 3 this year.
3 this year?
Wait, no, 3 in total. Yeah.
3 total?
Yeah, I did a bunch of sparring and stuff as well. I had 2 in the last 6 weeks. I had 1 just before that, and then like a bunch of sparring events. So yeah, I've had 3 fights.
So what I want to know is that first fight, the few days leading up to it. You know, you've obviously been putting in, I guess, years of training at this point as well.
Yeah.
And what is it like the few days prior to the fight, and then the lead up is that you're walking into the ring?
I guess because I'm still quite new to the actual fighting as opposed to just training, I still get quite nervous. It's a lot of like anticipation. I get very focused as well. So I tend to just like put the rest of my life on hold and just get really focused on, I guess, like the task that's coming up. But yeah, I get so nervous still. And then like every time before I walk into the ring, like you'll be super prepared. Your coaches will be there. They're walking you down. Like right as I get up to the ring to step in, I always have this moment where I'm like, nah, I don't want to do it. Like you just have this moment of like absolute, I don't want to say like terror, but like just nerves, and you feel like you're going to throw up, but yeah.
I think terror is pretty fair.
Yeah. I mean, it is, right? It's such an interesting concept. Like you're stepping into a ring to try and knock someone out in front of a huge audience. But yeah, I just get really focused in the lead up, and I love it because, again, like anything that pulls me out of my brain, which is constantly in overdrive, I tend to gravitate towards, and that does as well. It just like, it forces me to be so grounded and focused on that moment. Yeah, I love it. It's addictive.
Yeah, Kill or Be Killed will definitely
Yeah.
focus the mind a fair bit.
Oh, for sure.
How does it compare? So, 3 fights. So that first fight, I would have been shitting my dacks, no doubt, right? So that first fight, moment of terror, still feeling nervous with the preceding 2 fights. Does it start to feel different? So the most recent fight that you had, again, is it feeling a bit different? Like how is it comparing that sort of process again?
Yeah, I was less nervous going into my fight. So my last fight was actually just on Saturday, just been. I was less nervous going into this one, which felt really good. I guess because I knew what to expect, and then also understanding that having that moment of like, no, I don't want to do this is also very normal.
Yeah.
Like the first time it happened, I was like, oh my God, am I not ready for this? Like it kind of throws you off guard. But then understanding that that's just that like little fear voice popping up and that you just have to swallow it down and ignore it, that definitely helped. So yeah, I felt a lot calmer going into this fight, which was good. I mean, every fight I've had, sparring events I've had, like, I guess it's the adrenaline. You kind of have this little like disassociation,
Mhm.
like the fight will be over and I don't remember a thing that I did. Like it feels like I've just snapped my fingers and jumped forward. And it's just so yeah, that was quite interesting, but I felt like I had less of that in this fight right now. Like I was able to still be quite present even though I was under like a lot of, like physical and mental stress in the moment.
So it's a nice sort of feeling sort of coming into your own a little bit more, a little bit less
Yeah.
fear, but still a little hit of fuck. I don't want to do
Yeah.
this at all. Which
Yeah.
is, as you said, it's a really interesting. I imagine that the bulk of all fighters do it. So you listen to Tom Aspinall, for instance, who's UFC heavyweight
Yeah.
champ or interim champ at the moment, and the most recent fight he was going into, and he's like one of the biggest dudes there.
Yeah.
Like he's knocking people out, no worries. And he's
Yeah.
like, man, I'm terrified going into this fight.
Yeah.
And he was like openly sort of saying like, oh mate, absolutely terrified. But that's fear is where I do my best work.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I honestly am the same. I really love to push myself because I've found that, and I guess the first taste I got of this was really surfing. Like you, right? You paddle out, you're out there in these massive sets. You're the only girl out there. Everyone's out there getting barreled. It's terrifying. You don't want to do it, but you do it anyway. And even if you come off the wave or even if you lose a fight, you still gain so much confidence from realizing that, like, this voice popped up telling that you couldn't and that you didn't want to and you ignored it and you swallowed it down and you did it anyway. Like it just has such a nice knock-on effect for the rest of your, I guess, for everything else that you do in life as well. So yeah, realize that's what I mean when I say like recognizing that fear will come up, but you just get better at pushing it back down.
Do you tend to find, or do you have sort of a dual voice going on often? Like it sounds like you're someone that probably, I'm guessing, narrates a fair bit of what's going on and sort of breaking things down and sort of staying pretty active in the mind.
Yeah.
Do you tend to find that you've got multiple voices that you're contending with? So, again, Goggins puts up the example for, you've got essentially the bitch in you, the little
Yeah.
bitch, and then you've got the sort of commander in chief. The
Yeah.
commander in chief can always tell the bitch to shut up, but the bitch is usually louder.
Yeah, yeah, I do often. But I just, like I said, I just get better at ignoring that little voice that tells me I can't do it. Even with work, like I'm always trying to push myself with work, and naturally part of that process of trying something new or leveling up means that you're going to fail or you're going to make mistakes. And so that voice pops up pretty often, but if you can just push it down and be like, you know what, you can't get better without making mistakes. And it's the same with like surfing. You can't get a barrel if you don't come off the wave. And it's like the fighting, you can't push yourself to try harder if you don't lose or get punched in the face. Or so it's kind of like realizing that you kind of need one with the other.
How much of these each things, surfing, Muay Thai, design, clothing, like how often are you seeking mentors within these realms? Are some of them you're not really looking at all, you're just sort of naturally trying to learn yourself, or again, are you sort of seeking out, like I guess with Muay Thai you have coaching as well? What sort of like is the mentor look like for you?
Um, I think with work side of things, I push myself because I want to be better and I enjoy it. With the physical, I think I don't know. Wait, what do you mean?
Just like in terms of, do you typically seek out mentors? So
Mm,
whether that be coaching within the sport side of things, or whether
yeah.
that be in terms of development, in terms of business side.
Yeah, I do. I really admire people that are better than me because I understand the journey that it takes to get better. And I'm always am looking to get better as well. So yeah, with Muay Thai, like with running, with surfing, with work, I'll always try and learn from people who've done what I'm trying to do or who do what I'm doing better, and I'll try and understand how they got there so that I can do it as well.
Do you have a bit of a sense of where you want to end up over the next, are you someone that has a bit of a long-term plan? are you someone that's just, again, following the things that you're passionate and interested in right now?
I mean, loosely, I guess I have a plan, but not really, which is quite strange for me because I really thrive on structure and direction. But when it comes to my life, I'm also very, I guess, like spontaneous and happy to just give anything a go. So, I mean, I have like financial goals, of course, like that. I guess that's the biggest one.
Be rich.
Yeah, literally, just like passive income so I don't have to work every day. Like that, honestly, is like the biggest goal for me that I'm working towards. But yeah, not really. Like I just am so happy to try new things and give it a go and just like see what happens. That for me is the biggest thing that I never want to stop actually. That's a goal, is to just always be learning. Doesn't matter what that looks like, but just always keeping things interesting.
Are you currently filled up with projects? So, are you currently out of the corner of your eye seeking any other projects to pick up on at the moment, or you're currently focused on the Muay Thai and the Your Collective and the Studio Ultra?
Yeah, I'm pretty full at the moment. So studio.
Do you want to fit in another thing?
Yeah,
there?
look, I struggle with this because like I said, I don't say no. And I have a habit of just like stacking and then burning the candle at both ends. But between Your Collective, which is now, it's like a full company. So I recently made the swap from sole trader to PTY Ltd, which is, I mean, has its own set of challenges, but between growing that so it's a fully functioning like company that can scale if I want it to, plus working with Studio Ultra, that was sort of like a new business venture that Tash, the original developer that I had working with Your Collective, we sort of like merged business ideas and created this separate thing. So that's what that is.
Give us a little rundown of what Studio Ultra is, its purpose is.
So Studio Ultra is Tasha's own design company. So I have mine, she has hers. But what we kind of found that over the years of working with Shopify was we pretty much developed kind of like our own theme. So we just had so much code and so many designs that we'd worked on over the years. We found that like not everyone has like a $20,000 or $30,000 budget to invest in a website. There's a lot of people out there who maybe have like $5,000 to $10,000, but they can't do a fully custom site, but they need a bit more than a DIY kind of slap it together job. Tash and I sort of created our own theme based on the resources that we already had and found a way to, I guess, tap into that lower price market and just knock out website. Literally, like we call it a website in a week. We'll knock out a website in a week because we use all the framework that we've already developed, and then we just change it based on each person's sort of like needs and aesthetics. So that has been really, really, again, that's been quite successful and a lot of work in, developing our own themes and templates that we can push out on Shopify.
And for the PTY Ltd sort of shift, what made you shift into a fully functioning company or corporate entity?
I
think tax thing or other.
Yeah, tax thing. Like living overseas, I'll be honest, living overseas for 5 years, coming back to Australia, I had a very steep learning curve. I more than doubled my income last year without realizing it. Went up a couple of tax brackets, didn't pay taxes as I should have. Got into a lot of trouble from the government, and then realized that, if I had a company in place with an accountant who worked for me and a tax agent who worked for me, I would be able to scale the business and make profit from it. Also, I guess like just the security of it. I work with big international e-commerce brands, exactly, and I've worked with very high-end budgets as well. So you don't want to have your personal assets at risk if anything ever went wrong. So this also then just gave me, I guess, like credibility to say, hey, I'm a company, not just a freelancer, but also just, I guess, the security of, having things set up properly.
I mean, that's the thing. I think you will find a lot of people that would ask, like, what's the best setup? Should you go for just your own ABN, or do you set up a corporate entity?
Yeah.
And I think you've probably gone about the right way, though you've had to learn a harsh lesson as a result in the meantime.
But I'm all for it, like you don't learn if you don't make mistakes.
Plus, you can get caught up in the weeds of what's the best structure? How do we structure this? It's like, well, get the work done first. And if you make some mistakes, you'll probably figure out, all right, well, now that I'm actually doing the thing that I said I was going to do, now we should figure out the structure around it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just, I guess it's leading me closer to that goal of like, passive income or making, consistently making like 6 figures a year, is that I've now got it set up in place so I can. Like I know I can track exactly how much tax I need to have and how much tax I need to owe, how much GST I'm owing, how much I need to put aside for like Medicare levies, etc. Like I can now also pay myself, like because I pay myself a salary every month, I can pay myself sick leave, I can pay myself holiday leave. So setting it up that way, so then I also, if I wanted to take time off, I don't have the stress of like, oh my God, if I'm not working, I'm not making money. Like I've got it set up in a way that it's more structured now, which is
gives you a bit more
helpful.
breathing space.
It does, yeah.
Nice. And then just as a side note for finance and stuff, do you also just put money aside for like investing, savings? Do you do anything like that nature?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it depends. Obviously every month is different in terms of what I can pay myself from my company, but that's where having an account has been really helpful, is that I pay myself a percentage, like once I've done taxes, GST, all of that, I pay myself a percentage. We then look at how much money I can afford to keep in the company, and then whatever's left over I'll put into savings. But yeah, that's been a game changer, like putting money back into my company and keeping it there, and then figuring out how I can run company expenses through the company.
So having a good accountant for you ended up being a big game changer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Highly recommend it. Even if you're a sole trader or a freelancer, like just cop the costs and get an accountant.
How much does it cost roughly for an accountant to sort of be doing what they're doing for you?
I guess it depends. Like it depends if they're doing your bookkeeping as well. Mine costs me probably like, I want to say maybe between $800 and $1,000 a quarter, which is, it's quite
good.
affordable.
Yeah. And tax deductible.
And also tax deductible, exactly, yeah. So it's affordable. But, I mean, if she was doing all of my reconciling, if she was paying all of my bills, obviously it would be more expensive.
Sure.
But I do all of that myself, and I just have her sort of like check in. And
does that mean you're using like Xero?
I use Xero, yeah, yeah. Also another thing worth investing in, like, don't just get the cheapest one, like get a business plan, even though it's $70 a month. Like again, it tracks exactly how much you have to have put aside for taxes, GST, superannuation, because that's the other thing. I now also pay myself super. Yeah, it's just.
Are you maxing out your super?
Oh, look, I would love to not pay it if I could, but yeah,
Okay.
I am. I'm paying the highest bracket at the moment because I went so long without paying myself super.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's still, you get an instant return on it. It's some like,
yeah,
you get an extra 17 cents or something for every dollar you put in. So
yeah, exactly.
there is a return there, and
Yeah.
certainly the compound interest does not hurt over long periods. So
yeah, for sure.
there's a lot of people out there from financial planners that actually recommend that as your first investment strategy, which is you max out the 25 grand I think that you can put in per year.
Yeah.
Then you move into other investment strategies. So
yeah, you're right. And I have previously in the past, if I've had a lump sum.
Not financial advice.
Yeah, no. Yeah, please take nothing.
Jesus
like
Christ.
just learn from my mistakes. But yeah, I have previously like put money into super if I've had extra money, and even though it stings a little bit at the moment because it's more fun to,
hold on to it.
Yeah, it's better to have it there.
So they say.
Yes.
So they say. So the last couple of things is, over this period, there's a lot going on. There's a lot still to come, which is very cool. If you're looking back that 5 sort of 10 years in the past, or we'll go 5 years ago, is there any advice that you'd sort of give yourself from 5 years ago, knowing where you are now?
Not really, to be honest. Like, no. Like, I honestly look back at the 5. I'll say 10 years because the lead up towards, pre me living in Bali is also very linked. Like, I feel like everything that I've done, I would honestly do again. And the only thing I would change is just setting up a company properly from the start. But like, even then, like I had such a fun time, and I still have such a fun time, and I'm really proud of everything that I've done and everything I've tried. And I honestly wouldn't do anything differently, because like doing things the way that I did was kind of what shaped me here.
Yep.
Obviously I had slip ups along the way, but like, I've been running my own business for 7 or 8 years, and now I'm living in this like bowler apartment in Fremantle. I've lived all around the world. I've traveled all around. Like I've done things really well, and I'm like super proud of it.
As you should be. Very
Yeah.
cool. Normally the follow-up question to that one would be, what advice do you think you'd need to hear now from your 5-year self in the future? So, if you were to give yourself advice now, what do you think you'd need to hear? But it sounds like it could also just be Probably nothing. Probably just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, just like don't be afraid to try. That's the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to try. And that's the advice that I'm kind of giving myself now. Like I have goals of what I want to do and I think just keep doing it. Like just trusting the process and just giving it a shot. Like even if you're not qualified, if you've got no experience, if you're not good enough, like who cares? Do it anyway and just see what happens because you'll learn and you'll grow regardless.
Before stepping in the ring, even though you get a fear
Yeah,
of about to die, I don't want to do this, do it anyway.
Yeah, actually, yeah, probably. If you're going to take up Muay Thai, like, train first. Don't just blindly step into a ring. That would be the only thing.
All right. Well, look, appreciate your time, Gemma. It's been awesome getting a bit of a sense of the cool journey that you've been on. I agree that I wouldn't change anything from what I'd seen anyway, but look forward to seeing what happens next in the PTY LTD space, in Studio Ultra. So thanks, and hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Ciao.